She said, "I think we should take a break," during what I thought was our perfect anniversary dinner, and somehow I knew this conversation would change everything between us. Maya had orchestrated every detail flawlessly at our favorite steakhouse in Austin, securing the private booth overlooking the downtown skyline where we'd celebrated my last promotion, ordering my favorite Woodford Reserve bourbon before I even arrived, and wearing that exact blue dress from our first date 2 years ago when she'd nervously spilled wine on herself while laughing at my terrible cybersecurity jokes. I'd been carrying the engagement ring in my jacket pocket for 3 weeks now, a princess-cut solitaire I'd saved 6 months to afford, planning to propose next month after my senior analyst promotion came through and we could finally start seriously house hunting in those tree-lined suburbs Maya always talked about. As someone who designs security protocols for a living, I'm naturally methodical about timing and planning major life decisions, carefully analyzing risk factors and optimal outcomes, and everything had seemed perfectly aligned for taking our relationship to the next level. Maya launched into what sounded like a meticulously rehearsed speech about needing space to grow individually and wanting dedicated time to focus on expanding her art therapy practice with veterans at the downtown counseling center where she'd been working since graduation. She used carefully chosen phrases like personal growth journey and rediscovering my authentic self, with the clinical precision of someone who'd clearly practiced this entire conversation multiple times in front of her bedroom mirror. I watched her delicate fingers fidget with her wine glass, avoiding direct eye contact while methodically explaining how this temporary separation would ultimately strengthen our emotional bond and help us both emerge as more complete, self-actualized individuals ready for deeper commitment and genuine intimacy. The strange thing was, as she systematically laid out her carefully constructed rationale with the thoroughness of a project presentation, I found myself actually nodding along and recognizing the unexpected validity of her points. Instead of feeling the crushing devastation and desperate pleading she was obviously anticipating, I experienced this profound wave of relief washing over me like stepping into cool air conditioning after being trapped in oppressive Texas summer heat for hours. I realized with startling clarity that I'd been harboring my own serious doubts about our long-term compatibility for months but had remained anchored in the comfortable familiarity of our established routine rather than confronting these increasingly uncomfortable truths about our fundamental differences. When I calmly told her that I'd actually been questioning whether we were truly right for each other but hadn't wanted to hurt her feelings or disrupt the stability we'd worked so hard to build together over 2 years, her confident expression crumbled like a poorly designed firewall under a sophisticated cyber attack. She'd clearly anticipated tears, desperate bargaining, maybe even righteous anger, any emotional response that would confirm she was breaking the heart of a man who couldn't possibly imagine life without her guiding presence. Instead, I started discussing practical logistics like responsible adults navigating a business dissolution, asking methodical questions about our shared apartment lease downtown, who would keep our combined Netflix and Spotify accounts, and how to fairly divide the kitchen appliances and furniture we'd enthusiastically bought together during our optimistic nesting phase last spring. The profound irony wasn't lost on me that her carefully choreographed breakup speech had accidentally liberated both of us from a relationship we'd both been too comfortable and conflict-avoidant to examine honestly and objectively. By the time our server discreetly brought the check, Maya looked genuinely confused and almost disappointed that her dramatic exit strategy hadn't produced the emotional devastation and desperate counterproposals she'd apparently been counting on to validate her difficult decision. Maya started manufacturing emergencies within a week of our break, and as someone professionally trained to spot security threats and analyze suspicious behavioral patterns, I recognized her manipulation tactics immediately. It began with a frantic series of texts about a supposed car accident on I-35 near downtown Austin, complete with carefully staged photos of what looked like minor fender damage and increasingly dramatic descriptions of severe whiplash symptoms that apparently required immediate emotional support from someone who truly understood her vulnerable mental state. Instead of rushing to her rescue like the old Blake would have done without question, I responded with clinical efficiency, texting her insurance company's 24-hour claim number and the contact information for 3 highly rated auto body shops in her immediate area that could handle both repairs and rental car arrangements. When she called an hour later sounding genuinely confused and frustrated about why I wasn't already speeding to her location with flowers and comfort food, I calmly explained that she seemed to have everything completely under control and I had complete confidence in her ability to handle this situation independently like the capable adult she'd always claimed to be. The medical scares escalated dramatically over the following weeks, with increasingly creative emergency room visits for mysterious chest pains that mimicked heart attacks, severe anxiety attacks that required immediate psychiatric evaluation, and a suspicious mole that absolutely demanded immediate examination by an expensive oncologist despite her complete lack of family cancer history. I responded to each supposed crisis with the same professional detachment I used with cybersecurity incidents at work, sending her phone numbers for nurse hotlines, links to reputable medical websites that could help her self-diagnose minor issues, and contact information for specialists who were actually covered by her insurance plan rather than the premium concierge doctors she seemed to prefer. The fake work crises at the Art Therapy Center became particularly elaborate productions, involving supposed budget cuts that threatened her position despite the center's recent federal grant approval, difficult veteran clients having convenient breakthrough moments that required extensive overtime documentation, and grant applications with impossible deadlines that supposedly demanded complete weekend sacrifice of her personal time. I offered to review her resume formatting using my technical writing skills and sent her links to comprehensive job posting websites along with contact information for professional development workshops offered through the university's continuing education program. Maya's growing desperation became almost palpable when she claimed her apartment had been burglarized while she was conveniently visiting her sister in San Antonio for the weekend, describing violated personal space and missing family heirlooms that made her feel completely unsafe about staying there alone during such a vulnerable emotional period. Instead of immediately offering my spare bedroom like she was obviously hoping, I sent her links to reputable hotel booking sites with extended stay discounts, contact information for 3 different security companies that specialized in installing comprehensive monitoring systems, and helpful articles about renters' insurance claims procedures that would expedite her reimbursement process. The calculated timing of these elaborate emergencies became glaringly obvious when I realized they always coincided perfectly with my social media activity or whenever mutual friends mentioned casually seeing me around Austin looking genuinely happy and relaxed for the first time in months. The technological breakthrough came when I discovered we'd never properly disconnected our shared Google Calendar from back when we used to coordinate date nights and weekend plans like responsible adults. Maya had been systematically monitoring my entire schedule through this forgotten digital connection, precisely timing her manufactured crises to interrupt my pottery classes at the community center, my productive coffee meetings with potential freelance clients, and even my peaceful grocery shopping trips to that organic market near campus where I'd started buying ingredients for cooking experiments. Every single supposed emergency had been strategically scheduled to maximize emotional impact and demand immediate attention during moments when I was clearly moving forward with my independent life. When I finally disconnected the shared calendar and changed all my digital passwords using the same comprehensive security protocols I routinely implemented for corporate clients protecting sensitive financial data, Maya's crisis timing became noticeably less precise and well-coordinated, definitively confirming my professional suspicions about her sophisticated surveillance methods and carefully calculated manipulation tactics specifically designed to maintain emotional control over someone who had already made the conscious choice to walk away from her exhausting drama. Maya escalated to physical surveillance within 2 weeks, and I started noticing her everywhere I went around Austin like some kind of poorly trained private investigator. She began appearing at my Tuesday evening pottery classes at the community center, claiming she'd suddenly developed a passionate interest in ceramic arts despite having mocked my hobby for months as impractical and messy. I watched her fumble awkwardly with clay while obviously watching me interact with other students, particularly Emma, the instructor who'd been patiently helping me master wheel throwing techniques. Maya showed up at my favorite coffee shop near the university district every morning, strategically positioning herself at tables with clear sight lines to my usual corner booth where I did freelance coding work before heading to the office. She'd sit there nursing a single latte for hours, pretending to work on her laptop while obviously monitoring my conversations and taking note of who I talked to during my routine visits. The surveillance became so obvious that Marcus, the barista, started making jokes about my apparent stalker, asking if I needed him to call campus security or create some kind of distraction so I could escape through the back entrance. Maya even began appearing outside my office building downtown, claiming she had client meetings in the same complex despite working exclusively with veterans at a facility across town. I discovered she'd actually gotten herself hired as a substitute art therapist at the counseling center inside my building, creating a legitimate excuse to be there while completely violating professional boundaries and probably multiple ethical guidelines. She'd time her arrivals to coincide with my lunch breaks, positioning herself in the lobby with perfect views of the elevator banks, watching who I left with and timing how long I stayed away from my desk. The pattern became so predictable that I started varying my schedule randomly, using different entrances, and taking meetings at coffee shops across the city just to see if she'd follow me there too. Maya began pumping our mutual friends for detailed information about my weekend plans, suddenly showing intense interest in group activities she'd previously avoided as boring or beneath her sophisticated tastes. She started expressing enthusiasm for craft beer brewing after learning I joined a homebrewing club, despite having consistently complained about beer being too fattening and unsophisticated throughout our entire relationship. When our friend Jake mentioned my plans to attend a food truck festival downtown, Maya immediately volunteered to help organize carpools and coordinate group activities, desperately trying to insert herself into social situations where she could monitor my interactions with other people. The most disturbing realization came when she started referencing private conversations I'd had with coworkers, mentioning my weekend hiking plans before I'd told anyone outside the office, and somehow knowing about my freelance projects that I'd only discussed in supposedly confidential client meetings. I began testing her knowledge by sharing false information with different people, tracking which fake details she'd repeat back to me during her increasingly frequent accidental encounters around the city. When she casually mentioned my supposed plans to visit my parents in Dallas next weekend, information I'd only shared with my office manager as part of a deliberately planted false story, I knew she was systematically gathering intelligence about my personal life through multiple sources. The professional ethics violation became clear when I realized she was potentially accessing confidential client information through her substitute position at the counseling center, using her therapeutic credentials to justify being in spaces where she could monitor my professional activities. I started documenting everything with the same methodical approach I used for cybersecurity incident reports, taking time-stamped photos of her appearances, saving screenshots of her social media posts that revealed knowledge she shouldn't have, and maintaining detailed logs of her surveillance patterns that clearly demonstrated coordinated stalking behavior rather than coincidental encounters around a city of nearly 1 million people. The social media spectacle reached its peak at our mutual friend Sarah's engagement party, held at a trendy rooftop bar in downtown Austin with panoramic views of the city skyline and about 40 guests from our overlapping social circles. Maya had been strategically positioning herself throughout the evening, nursing expensive cocktails while monitoring my interactions with other guests, particularly my conversations with Emma, who I'd invited as my date after weeks of getting to know each other better through pottery classes and coffee meetings that had evolved into genuine friendship. I noticed Maya's increasingly agitated behavior as she watched Emma and me laughing together near the bar, her forced smile becoming more strained each time someone complimented how natural we looked together as a couple. The confrontation erupted when Maya approached our conversation circle after clearly building up liquid courage, her voice rising to ensure maximum audience participation as she launched into a dramatic performance about how I had completely abandoned her during her most vulnerable time of personal growth and self-discovery. She accused me of being emotionally unavailable and deliberately cruel for respecting the break she had explicitly requested, demanding that I prove our 2-year relationship had actually meant something by fighting harder for our connection instead of just walking away like a coward. The entire rooftop went silent as Maya's voice cracked with what appeared to be genuine emotion, tears streaming down her face as she publicly berated me for honoring her original request for space and independence. I remained completely calm while she escalated her performance, simply pointing out that she was the one who had wanted this separation and I was merely respecting her clearly stated wishes about needing time to focus on personal development without the pressure of our relationship dynamics. This logical response seemed to infuriate her further, as she clearly expected me to either grovel for forgiveness or engage in some kind of dramatic public declaration of my undying love that would validate her entire manipulation campaign. When several friends started looking uncomfortable with her increasingly unhinged behavior, Maya shifted tactics and began accusing me of moving on too quickly and insensitively, suggesting that anyone who could transition to dating someone new so rapidly had never genuinely cared about their previous relationship in the first place. The unexpected twist came when our friend David pulled me aside later that evening to show me his phone, revealing a series of manipulative messages Maya had been sending to multiple people in our social circle over the past month. She'd been systematically asking everyone to convince me to contact her, describing elaborate scenarios about how much she was suffering and needed my support during this difficult transitional period in her life. Most disturbing were the screenshots David showed me of Maya's attempts to gather detailed information about Emma, including her work schedule at the pottery studio, her educational background, and even her previous dating history, despite Maya having never actually met or spoken to Emma before tonight. When David mentioned that at least 6 other people had received similar messages asking them to play intermediary or gather intelligence about my personal life, I realized Maya had been conducting a coordinated campaign to manipulate our entire social network into pressuring me back into her orbit while simultaneously stalking someone who had done nothing except show interest in spending time with me during pottery classes and weekend coffee dates that had naturally developed into something meaningful and genuine. The manipulation finale came when I announced through social media that I was moving to a new apartment across town, partly for a shorter commute to work but mostly to escape Maya's constant surveillance of my current neighborhood and building. Within hours of posting about needing packing supplies, Maya showed up at my door with her friend Josh in tow, claiming she was ready to have a mature conversation about working on our relationship and demanding the closure she apparently deserved after everything we'd been through together. I opened my door to find her standing there with red-rimmed eyes and a determined expression, flanked by Josh who looked distinctly uncomfortable about being dragged into this confrontation but was clearly there to provide emotional support and witness whatever dramatic scene Maya had planned for this final attempt at reconciliation. Maya immediately launched into a carefully prepared speech about how she'd spent weeks in therapy realizing that her request for a break had been a mistake born from fear of commitment, and she was now ready to do the hard work of rebuilding our relationship if I could just find it in my heart to forgive her temporary moment of weakness and confusion. She accused me of moving on too quickly and abandoning someone who had just needed time to figure things out, revealing that the entire break had actually been some kind of elaborate test to see if I would fight for our relationship instead of simply accepting her decision like a mature adult. When I refused to engage with this obvious manipulation and calmly explained that I'd moved on because I'd found someone who actually wanted to be with me without playing psychological games, Maya's desperation escalated to threats of self-harm if I didn't at least agree to couples counseling to explore whether we could rebuild what we'd lost. I immediately called the crisis intervention hotline while she was still standing in my doorway, putting the phone on speaker so the trained counselor could directly assess Maya's mental state and offer appropriate resources for someone threatening to hurt themselves over a relationship that had ended months ago. While Maya frantically tried to convince the crisis counselor that she wasn't actually suicidal but was just expressing emotional pain in dramatic terms, I used my phone to document her threats and erratic behavior, creating the same kind of incident report I would file for any security breach at work that required professional intervention and official documentation. The unexpected twist came when Josh, whom Maya had brought along to support her position and validate her emotional distress, actually sided with me after witnessing her increasingly unhinged behavior throughout this confrontation. After Maya finally left with the crisis counselor's contact information and a list of local therapists who specialized in relationship trauma, Josh stayed behind to apologize for being involved in what he now recognized as harassment and stalking behavior that had made him increasingly uncomfortable over the past several weeks. He revealed that Maya had been relentlessly pumping him for information about my activities, asking him to drive by my apartment to see if I was home, and even requesting that he create fake social media accounts to monitor Emma's online activity and gather intelligence about her personal life and professional commitments. Josh admitted that he'd initially agreed to help because he thought Maya was genuinely heartbroken and needed support during a difficult breakup, but he'd gradually realized she was orchestrating an elaborate campaign to control and manipulate me rather than actually processing the end of our relationship in any healthy way. When he told me that Maya had been lying to friends and family about me trying to contact her and begging for reconciliation, creating an entirely fictional narrative where I was the one desperately pursuing her while she nobly tried to maintain appropriate boundaries, I realized the full extent of her delusional thinking and complete disconnection from reality regarding our actual post-breakup interactions. 6 months later, I was thriving in ways I hadn't imagined possible during the suffocating final months of my relationship with Maya, living in my new apartment across town and building something genuinely healthy with Emma that felt effortless compared to the constant drama I'd previously accepted as normal. I'd received a promotion to senior cybersecurity analyst at work, finally achieving the career milestone I'd been working toward for years, and started teaching digital safety workshops at the community center on weekends, sharing my professional expertise with small business owners and senior citizens who needed practical guidance navigating online security threats. Emma and I had developed a relationship based on mutual respect and shared creative interests, spending weekend mornings at the pottery studio where she taught advanced will throwing techniques, and evening exploring Austin's food truck scene or hiking the trails around Zilker Park without any underlying tension about whether I was measuring up to some impossible standard. She genuinely appreciated my methodical approach to planning dates and remembered details about my work projects, asking thoughtful questions about cybersecurity trends and celebrating my professional achievements without making everything about how it affected her personal comfort or social status among her friends. Through the grapevine of former mutual friends, I learned that Maya had been systematically spreading stories about me being emotionally manipulative and unable to handle strong women who knew their own worth, painting herself as the victim of a controlling relationship despite being the one who had initiated our break and then stalked me for months afterward. The people who actually knew me well saw through her narrative immediately, recognizing the obvious projection and understanding that someone who would conduct surveillance campaigns and manufacture emergencies was probably not the most reliable narrator of relationship dynamics. Most of our former mutual friends had quietly distanced themselves from Maya after witnessing her increasingly erratic behavior at social events and receiving her manipulative messages asking them to gather intelligence about my personal life and new relationship with Emma. The unexpected twist occurred when Maya sent me a wedding invitation through certified mail, announcing her sudden engagement to Josh with an elaborate ceremony planned at an expensive venue outside Austin that seemed designed to project an image of romantic success and emotional recovery. The invitation was clearly intended to devastate me or prompt some kind of desperate attempt to stop the wedding, accompanied by a handwritten note about how she'd finally found someone who truly appreciated her and knew how to treat a woman with the respect she deserved. I simply marked my RSVP as unable to attend without providing any additional commentary or drama, treating it with the same professional detachment I'd maintained throughout her entire post-breakup manipulation campaign. When Emma found the invitation on my kitchen counter and asked if I felt weird about my ex getting married so quickly, I realized that I felt absolutely nothing beyond mild curiosity about whether Josh actually knew what he was signing up for or if he'd also been swept up in Maya's ability to present a charming facade before revealing her true controlling nature underneath the surface. Emma and I got engaged 8 months later in the pottery studio where we'd first connected, surrounded by the ceramic pieces we'd created together and the quiet satisfaction of building something authentic with someone who enhanced rather than drained my daily existence. I proposed during one of our regular Saturday morning sessions, presenting the ring between 2 coffee mugs we'd made for each other, keeping everything simple and focused on the genuine partnership we'd developed through shared creative interests and mutual respect for each other's independence and professional goals. We planned a small ceremony at the studio for the following spring, inviting only close family and friends who had supported our relationship from the beginning, avoiding the elaborate social media spectacle that seemed designed more for external validation than genuine celebration of 2 people choosing to build a life together. I occasionally spotted Maya around Austin looking increasingly isolated and desperate, usually alone at coffee shops or restaurants where she'd scroll through her phone with the frantic energy of someone searching for validation that never materialized, but I felt only distant sympathy rather than any obligation to intervene in the self-created drama that had apparently become her primary form of social interaction. The final twist came 3 weeks before Maya's planned wedding when Josh called me unexpectedly, his voice shaky as he explained that he'd discovered Maya was still monitoring my social media through fake accounts and had been lying about me trying to contact her throughout their entire relationship. He'd found screenshots on her laptop of my engagement announcement with Emma, along with detailed notes about our pottery studio visits and weekend activities that she'd somehow been tracking despite my efforts to maintain complete digital separation from her surveillance network. Josh revealed that Maya had been creating elaborate fictional narratives about me desperately reaching out to her through mutual friends and even showing up at her workplace, stories she'd used to justify her ongoing obsession with monitoring my personal life while portraying herself as the mature party who was graciously refusing to engage with my supposed attempts at reconciliation. When he confronted her about these lies, Maya had admitted that she'd never actually moved on from our relationship and had only gotten engaged to Josh because she hoped it would prompt me to realize what I was losing and fight to win her back before it was too late. Josh thanked me for not responding to any of Maya's manipulations over the past year, explaining that my complete lack of engagement had helped him recognize the toxic patterns in her behavior and understand that he'd been dating someone who was fundamentally incapable of genuine emotional connection with anyone other than her own reflection. He called off the wedding 2 days later, sending Maya's expensive invitations and venue deposits into the irrelevant waste pile where they belonged, while I continued building the peaceful, drama-free life I'd discovered was possible when you chose partners based on compatibility rather than appearance and manipulation skills. I realized that the greatest victory wasn't revenge or vindication, but simply the complete indifference I felt towards someone who had once controlled my emotions, proving that sometimes the best response to toxic behavior is living authentically with someone who actually wants to be there without games, tests, or elaborate schemes designed to maintain artificial drama in place of genuine intimacy and partnership.